All right, this one would be the next Sham, but it actually is made like a pillowcase. And then this one is also made like a pillowcase, and then it has this little tie. So I'm gonna make this like a pillowcase, but I'm gonna make it longer with this piece here, because you see how this one is fitted down to the pillow. So how are we gonna do that? First thing we need to do is measure our pillow again. There's a regular pillow. Where's my tape measure? Cooper, did you take my tape measure? It was right here on the floor. And now it's not here on the floor. Where's my tape measure, dog? Seriously. I've had that tape measure since I was 20 years old. Where is my tape measure? Okay.
And yes, Cooper had it in the yard.
Now this pillow doesn't have one center seam. It's made a little differently, but we're going to treat it like it does. So we will measure from the middle of that across to the middle of that. And it is 29.5. And then this way, is 20.
Now I want to say up front here that I'm no professional seamstress. I just kind of do what I do with the limited skills that I have, and I go for it. There's probably better ways to do this. Like I said, I'm not a pro at this. So what are we gonna call this? I think I'll call it pillowcase number 1.
All right, our pillow measured 29.5 by 20. Now a pillowcase is very different than the European Sham that I did in the previous video. The Sham had an opening at the back like an envelope. Obviously a pillowcase does not. And I'm going to make French seams on this pillowcase, and I'm only going to be stitching it down one of the links and the bottom end. So first things first, that means that this piece of fabric is going to go all the way around this dimension of the pillow, which is 20 inches. So I'm going to want to double that, which would be 40. Plus I need to add 1/2 inch seam allowances on each end of the cuts. So that's adding 1 inch. So that's going to be 41 inches. So the way I'm going to figure it first is to look at this first, what I would call cuff. So we'll say the white cuff. So the next dimension I need to know is this right here. I want you to focus right here. There's no raw edge on a pillowcase, obviously. And I don't want it to look seamed. I want this to be folded. I want it to be tufted on the outside and the inside. So whatever length I decide this is going to be, I need to double it and then add the inch for the seam allowance. And I measured some pillowcases, and most of my pillowcases have a 4-inch cuff. But my buttons, I don't think that would look right with this just being 4 inches. So I'm gonna say I want this to be 6 inches. Doubled would be 12, plus an inch for the seam allowance. So this needs to be 13 inches. So this next piece from here to here is going to be the blue, and it will be seamed on both ends. And it's obviously not as wide as this. And just, this is kind of how I how I plan things out. So if that was 6 inches and I come to there, to me that looks a little over half. I think 4 inches would look good. But I need to add a 1/2 inch seam for right here, a 1/2 inch seam for right here, so that's going to be 5 inches by 41 inches, and that's going to be the blue cuff trim. It's not really cuff, but we'll call it that. All right, and so now I need to know what this measurement is from here to here. Well, I think I want the pillow. I mean, normally I think the pillow would come to about here, and then you'd have the cuff, but I'm gonna say it's gonna come a little bit more like in here, so that this will look fluffy when I button it. Plus, I don't want a really long thing there. So, do some math. 29.5. All right, the blue piece finished is going to be 4, so we're going to subtract 4. That's 25.5. And just to make it easy, I'm going to say this distance from here to here is about 1.5 inches. That gets me down to 24. So I know it needs to be 41 inches around, and I need to add an inch for my seam allowance. So I'm going to make this main white right here, from here to here, it wraps around, 25 inches by 41. We'll call it the main white. So now I have my cuts. So the next step in making the next set of pillowcase shams is to quilt my fabric. Now I want to show you how I did it. This piece is already quilted. Turn it over, you can see that I have my diamonds. And I'm going to show you how I did it. Now normally you might want to work from the front, and the reason for that is because sometimes your stitches on the top side look a lot better than the stitches coming up from the bobbin. That wouldn't be that way with a new machine, but with my old machine sometimes it can bunch up. So I just crossed my fingers and it worked out just fine. The reason I wanted to mark it from the back side and sew it from the back side was because this pattern is already here for me and I could find my stitches easily. The way I marked it, I'm going to show you now. You might see a little bit of purple in here. I used a disappearing erasable pen is what it's called. You can just take a wet rag and rub across it and it will come out. I haven't even done that. Actually, air will also take it out. If you just leave it over time, you can see that a lot of my lines are gone. So here is how I did it. Now with each piece, I left extra material of the quilting fabric. And the reason that I did that
was because I wanted to make sure I had some cross hatching right in the center of the piece. Not that it matters that much, but that's why I left it. So the first thing I'm going to do is look and see where the center of my piece is. Now this is really close. So I'm going to put me a couple little marks here so I know where I'm at. I don't have to move my fabric. That's good. So I'm just going to trim this off. I'm going to knock it with scissors. So I've got my center marked. Now I know on the other one, what I did was 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 little squares to make my diamond. Now the other thing I'd like to do is fold it in half this direction. Find out where I am closest to center. Be nice if it was more like that, but I'm gonna say that this is center. Let's just start here. If I don't like the placement, I can move it. All right, well that's not bad. We see got a little bit more of a point here than we do up here, but that's not going to be noticeable, I don't think, by the time it is stitched, put together. So that's where I'm going to go with it. So now I'll take my ruler and I'm just going to line up these lines. Close enough. I'll stitch on the seam even if my purple line is off. I just need it to help me identify. And when we're sewing this, it's important with quilting stuff, you're going to want to start in the center. So for example, this line I just drew, I will start here and I will sew that stitch, I will sew this stitch, and on to the end, flip it around and do all those. Then I'll come back and do the opposite direction. And the reason for that is you might get a little puckering, so you want to work from the center out to make sure that the top fabric isn't puckering on you. So I'll get this all marked and then we'll go sew it up. All right, I have my whole pattern sewn here, double checking, and I ironed it out. Now my next step is going to be to add, let's look back at the picture. We're looking at this one right here. This is the little piece that we need to add on. So I do have to stitch this, and it will have a raw edge. So what I will do after I run my stitch, then I'm going to come back and I'm going to zigzag that raw edge. So I'll go do that now and then we'll come back. That's stitched now and I zigzagged the edge. Ideally, if I had a serger, which I don't, that would have been the best thing to do. You can also, when you're cutting your fabric, cut with pinking shears, and that helps it to not be ravelly. But I didn't do that, so I had to zigzag. Now we're going to open this out, and I'm going to go ahead and press it and come back. Okay, now we're getting to the fun part here. I've pressed this up. Now we're going to lay this upper cuff and line it up with this edge. We will pin it.
going to roll this up into a little tube. Trying to keep it kind of small here. All right, and we want to line up this cuff where we pinned it. It's a little bulky because this is such thick fabric. But we're going to match and repin. This time I'm going to pin it across. Just line it up. Take the pin that you had in there and turn it perpendicular. Helpful tip here. You saw me pinning them from the top side, and I got down about here, and then I was like, why am I pinning it that way? Because I am left-handed. So as I sew, I want to be able to pull my pins out after I sew over them. But if you're right-handed, you would want to pin it this direction. So now I'm going to go sew a seam, and I'm going to do a 1/2 inch seam here. Now, this fabric here, some of it is a little longer. I could trim that off, but I'm not going to mess with that right now. I'm just going to put my eyeball right here and keep at a 1/2 inch. Then we'll come back, show you the fun part. Stitch the seam. Now I'm going to reach in here and start pulling my sausage roll. This is like wrestling a bear. This is a supersonic thick burrito, but we're getting there. Oh, yeah, here we go. Finally. Woo-wee. Oh. Okay, now we'll press this really well. Let's see, the beauty of doing it this way, is that if you look, now all the raw edges is in the inside of the cuff, and when we finish sewing it, it will never ever be seen. And this raw edge, remember, I fixed it. So let me iron this out, and then we'll go to the next step. Whew. All right, now I have folded it in half, just like the pillowcase is going to be, with right side facing up. And I know that looks like it's going to be wrong, but it's not, because we're going to do, or attempt to do, a French seam. Not really sure how well this is going to work, because it is so super thick. I trimmed a little bit of the inside seam, but we'll see how it goes. So you just want to pin down the long side and the short side, and I need to make doubly sure right here and here that this inset piece lines up exactly, because we want it to look like it's going completely around in a circle, in a full tube. I'm going to take about a 1/4 to a 3/8 inch seam here. But I need to make sure that I catch all the fabric, so I'll probably do a 3/8, and then I'll come back. My little old lady's machine wasn't real happy with me on that thick stuff up top. And now I'm trimming my seam down a little bit, somewhere around 1/4 of an inch. Best I could. Do some of these thicknesses is a little hard. So now what I want to do is turn it wrong side out. Now I need to press it. Okay, to make a French seam, we stitched it from with the right sides up. Now we've turned it. Now we're going to stitch it again, making sure that we stay away from this seam here. And we're going to stitch it again all the way around. And then when we turn it, I'll show you that we have a finished edge with no raw edges on the inside of the pillowcase sham. Well, this was so thick that I had to go wider than I really wanted to go, but I got it done. So now we're going to turn it. This is a lot easier to do when you're working with thin fabric. It's not a wrestle match like it was with this. Okay, let's look back at our picture. So, 3 buttons. My seam is down here, so this is going to be on the bottom. So this will be the right side of the bed. Let's see where we want to place the buttons. Now, I do want to make buttonholes because that's what it looks like here. As much as those are tucked, that looks like buttonholes. So the buttonhole is going to have to be on the top, and then the button will be sewn on the inside of the cuff, and then it'll come up through the buttonhole. What I'm going to do is find the center first. That looks to be center. So I'm going to mark a pin at the top of the button and at the bottom of the button. Okay. And now we'll just see what spacing looks right. I think about like that. So say 4 inches. Okay, and then we need to make sure that we are centered in here. Buttonhole time. Well, okay. I have to say that is the hardest pillow sham I have ever made. Got my buttonholes in, got my buttons sewn in. I have one more of these to make. And then the final design.